I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 is adoption of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that passes 4-0. And item 4 is matters from mayor. All I have is I attended the Waynesboro High School graduating class of 2023, and I would like to wish all of those graduating the very best as they embark on this new part of their life. Item 5 is matters from council. Is there anything?
I had an opportunity to go on tour with Trafford and Public Works Director, and I got to see the water plant. I also talked to a gentleman responsible for paving. It was very, very insightful. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. So looking forward to getting out and seeing some other things with Public Works.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Trafford.
Very good. And anything, Mr. Wood?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, that moves on to item 6 is consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that passes 4-0. Item 7 is to issue a proclamation naming May 22nd, 26 as Public Works Week in the city, May 22nd through the 26th as Public Works Week in the city of Waynesboro. Mr. Wood, would you please read that proclamation?
I would be happy to. Whereas Public Works professionals provide services of vital importance to our community and to the everyday lives of our citizens, and whereas the support of an informed community is essential to successful public works operations and programs such as water, sewer, streets, stormwater, refuse collection, and snow removal. And whereas the year 2023 marks the 24th year that Waynesboro has celebrated National Public Works Week with a special occasion. Now, therefore, we, the Waynesboro City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 22 through 26, 2023, as Public Works Week in the city of Waynesboro, Virginia, and call upon the community to acquaint themselves with our Public Works Department and to recognize the contribution our Public Works professionals make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Signed by Lana Williams, Mayor, attested by Julia Bortle, our Clerk of Council.
Okay. Would anybody like to come forward and receive this? Thank you.
Thank you for everything you all.
Please take all the time you need. We're still waiting on
Well, I was going to say I'll keep it brief because
please don't keep
I
it
have a
brief.
presentation
He's going to be 3 more minutes.
for you all later this evening. But just on behalf of all the men and women who work in public works and operations, engineering, water and wastewater treatment, I appreciate this. They are dedicated and hardworking, and something like this from our elected officials really means a lot to them. So thank you all.
You're most welcome. Mr. Ham, would you like to add anything?
Well, I would say that Mr. McCray is new to his position, and you're probably aware we've been through a number of retirements and leadership transitions. But Public Works is especially important to our community because they operate 4 or 5 different lines of business, and many people are aware. But for those who are not, your Public Works Department is responsible for providing potable water, treating your wastewater, collecting your refuse, maintaining your roads and your sidewalks, and also they're responsible for our stormwater maintenance and construction programs. So the amount of work, the amount of financial resource, and the diversity of talent that resides not just with Public Works Administration, but with the Operations Division is pretty remarkable. And not much happens in a city of our size without the benefit and care from dedicated Public Works folks. So we're grateful for Trafford and all the folks in Public Works who provide various services from recycling to leaf collection to snow removal, just all seasons. They're people of all seasons.
You can
So
go
with
on.
that, I might suggest that, absent Mr. Short, that we invite Mr. McCray back to the podium. And Trafford, if you're willing, can you go ahead and deliver your presentation now? Yeah. And then we'll take up the budgetary matters when we have the full attendance.
That would be great.
And like a true Public Works professional, he is ready
was
for
ready.
any eventuality.
There we go.
Make it work on the fly.
That's item 14, right?
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you all for letting me come talk with you all tonight about the Public Works Department's pavement maintenance program. Let Mr. Short be seated as well. Before we dive into talking about pavement maintenance, I wanted to give you all a brief update on the South River Waterline crossing at Ridgeview Park. You may have seen the equipment out there, or had some questions about what was going on. We had a contractor installing a 10-inch water line across the South River here. This is the culmination of actually about a decade's worth of projects that included over 2 miles of water main installation and the restoration of 76 services. What we've been focused on doing is improving both fire flows and the volume and pressure for our customers. So we had 2 projects that targeted both the Shore Road neighborhood and then also the Tree Streets. So what this project does is gives us a way to feed either side of the river if we need to take a main offline for maintenance. It also provides redundancy if our primary transmission line into downtown needs to be taken down for maintenance, and it will also provide improved fire flows and pressure for neighborhoods towards Rosser Avenue and West Main Street out to Hopeman Parkway. Another thing as we dive into the paving program, these are the scope and duration of projects we have to think about when we're talking about putting together a paving list. So for example, right now River Road has a ditch line down several blocks of it where we ran water mains over the past couple of years setting up this project. So as far as our pavement management program, what we wanted to talk about first, just get into a description of Waynesboro's road system, how road classifications and condition scores are developed, then talk about our current and future pavement maintenance plans, and then also how paving activities impact the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance for the city. So Waynesboro has about 125 lane miles of roads that are eligible for VDOT maintenance funds, and our annual allocation from the Commonwealth is approximately $4.5 million. And while that sounds like a lot of money, we have to take care of street lights, lane markings, sidewalks, bridges, pay for the electricity for the street lights, pay for the electricity for the traffic lights, pay for the equipment to upkeep all those things, leaf collection, snow removal. So all those things add up, and we strive to keep about $1 million annually intact for our pavement maintenance operations. So then those 125 lane miles within the city are broken down into some different road classifications, and these are federal categories that are then managed by the state, and so we have very little say in whether a road is what type of classification it is, but it does affect the amount of money we might receive for different types of roads. So the smallest percentage of roads, and very intentionally within the city, are principal arterials, and these are roads that are intended to carry a high volume of traffic in fairly small mileage situations. Minor arterials may provide more land access than principal arterials, but they don't actually penetrate into neighborhoods. A collector is going to pull traffic from local streets and push it to the arterial system, but it's never going to go more than a block or two into a neighborhood, ideally. And then local roads, which are over 70% of the roads that we have within the city, are neighborhood roads where through movement is deliberately discouraged. So just a little bit more about road classifications. On this map, the principal and minor arterials are lumped together. But as you can see, arterials are roads like Ludewitt, Rosser Avenue, Main Street, Delphine. And so these are the roads that are either moving people between business centers and neighborhoods or through the town itself. Collectors then funnel from the local roads, which are our neighborhood roads that are highlighted in blue. And so this shows kind of like that graph before. The majority of the roads within the city are local roads. So now that we have the road classifications, the next piece we have to consider is calculating road conditions. And so about every 4 years, we'll bring in an engineering consultant who has some highly specialized equipment, and they'll do what we call a ride through the city, and they'll drive all the roads within the city and collect high-resolution images of the roads, and then take those back and sift through their software and come back with some data, which then we put into our asset management software, Cartograph. So then, now that we've got those condition information, we come up with what we call an OCI, or Overall Condition Index, and that's a score of anywhere from 0 to 100. 100 is perfect, so that's a road that was just freshly paved. 0 is a road that's failed and has to be rebuilt. And that OCI score is a weighted average, so distress, which is just cracking, sometimes the worst is what we call alligatoring. That's 70% of the score, and then the ride, or just how bumpy the road is about 30% of the score. So this is a little bit more about the pavement condition and so what we're trying to do, so 100, that excellent score there, that's a newly paved road. So over the course of 75% of the life of a road, you lose about 40% of the drop in quality, and then it really tails off quickly somewhere around 10 years after a road is paved. So what we are talking about with the pavement maintenance program is employing some strategies to take care of pavement roads when they're still in a good condition and extend the life of the roads out 20, 25 years instead of 10 to 12 years. So now that we've got all this information, the road classifications, the score, the estimated budget of about $1 million, we generate a preliminary paving list to run some scenarios. The road classification plays an important role. It gets what we call a criticality factor. So a principal arterial is more critical to moving traffic through the city than a local road that may see a handful of trips per day. So we've got the paving scenarios. Then the next thing that our staff has to do is actually sit down and assess those scenarios. So we have to talk both with internal utilities as well as external utility providers about any projects they may have coming up. We have to do an assessment for ADA compliance. We have to talk to VDOT to make sure they don't have any projects coming up that may affect our paving schedule. If they're planning on a project in 2 years, we don't want to pave a road. We have to do field surveys to confirm road conditions and the paving list accuracy. We may have a road segment that has an extremely low score, but it's because it has one failed utility patch. So we don't need to pave the whole road. We need to perform a point repair in that area. So we have to do some things like that. We have to make sure, do we need to actually pave through an intersection? Was it paved 5 years ago and it's in pretty good shape and we can stop short? So there are things like that we have to do before we can have a final paving list. Just a little bit more about utility coordination. And like I was saying with the water line work and the tree streets and Club Court, these are projects that take multiple years to really come together. So this was a preliminary map provided to us by Columbia Gas in 2020 of 13th Street and Magnolia Avenue. That project is finally wrapping up here 3 years later. But so we have to have a good bit of back and forth with Columbia Gas, usually to some extent Dominion Power, about when they're working, and we may have to slide a paving segment back a year or two, or look at other ways for pavement maintenance. And then we do have standards that we hold both ourselves and outside utilities to, and essentially what we require is that the gravel base in a ditch line is benched or bridged out past the ditch line, and then the pavement even further. And what the intent of that is to bridge the ditch line and minimize any kind of settlement. So we take some steps like that to try to improve the quality of patching activities. And then as far as when do alterations require curb ramps, when do we have to consider ADA compliance? If it's just maintenance, if it's crack sealing, which we'll talk about, or patching, we can proceed. But if we're doing an alteration, and there are crosswalks, whether they're marked or unmarked, then we have to go in and assess whether the curb ramps in particular meet ADA compliance, and then in many cases replace those. So this here on the left is on the corner of York and Lyndhurst Road, and that was probably poured today, actually. But we're getting ready to do some pavement maintenance activities in that area, so upgrading curb ramps. And then here, this is in front of the Gorsuch Building on Wayne Avenue, where we did an upgrade ahead of paving Wayne Avenue a few years ago. So that's all the information that we have to assess to come up with a paving list or a pavement maintenance plan. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about what the city's current and future pavement maintenance plans look like. And this is just a quick illustration of why that matters. So this is a road in Connecticut where the center line of the road is actually the corporate line between two smaller localities. The entire road was milled and paved in 2004. On the left, there has been no additional work performed. On the right, the road was crack sealed and then had microsurfacing applied in 2010, and looks to be in fairly good shape. So in terms of why does pavement maintenance matter, we want to keep much of our road system as possible in good condition. So then current paving activities used within the city. In 2020, we started crack sealing, and this is actually done for roads that are in good condition, and it's pavement preservation technique. And the idea is to seal cracks so water can't get in and infiltrate the gravel base, or in freeze and thaw conditions in the wintertime, expand the pavement further. So it's extremely cost effective at about 3 cents per square foot. Milling and overlaying is something that you tend to do as roads fall into a poor condition. It's much more costly at $11 a square yard. And you get 10 to 15 years depending on the type of road. An arterial road is going to last far less than a neighborhood road. And then also utility patching, which we perform in-house, and that depends on the OCI level of the road. If it's a road we know we're going to pave within a couple of years, we meet the standards we have. We have had cases with outside utility providers where they worked in a road that we had paved within the previous 5 years, and we required them to pave at a full lane width back so that we had a like new road after their project. So the current pavement maintenance outlook, overall the city road network is classified as a 76 OCI score, and that's projected to decrease over time because of how costly just milling and overlaying is. And we don't have any pavement preservation techniques that we employ on roads that are in fair condition between a 60 and 80 condition index. So then the future pavement maintenance activities that we will be undertaking starting in 2023 include some of the things we've already talked about: crack sealing, utility patching, milling and overlaying roads that have fallen down into a poor condition. But we'll also begin employing microsurfacing as a technique beginning this year. And this is something, again, that we do in that pavement preservation range to keep roads in a fair to good condition. And it's about a third of the price of milling and overlaying, and has a life expectancy of 6 to 8 years. So we could microsurface a road twice for 2/3 of the price of building and paving it. And then, so why microsurfacing? We've spent several years looking at some different surfacing techniques besides just milling and overlay, and landed on microsurfacing as what we felt like was best within the city. This is not a new technology. It's been around for over 4 decades. It's a thin, 3/8 of an inch or so overlay. It can fill in some ruts. We think anything as much as 2 inches, we're probably going to need to do some base repair first. Cools fairly rapidly, so we can put traffic back on it within 1 to 2 hours. And it's, from a safety standpoint, it creates a more skid-resistant surface and doesn't have the gravel loss that you would equate with what you might think of as a typical surface treatment like chip sealing. So then, as we incorporate microsurfacing into our future pavement maintenance operations, we project that the overall condition will increase marginally by a couple of percentage points, but it will at least hold steady, which is not where we're at now. And then just looking at over 5 years, if we incorporate microsurfacing in milling and paving, total cost would be $5.3 million, and we would resurface 39% of our roads. If we solely mill and pave over 5 years to keep up our current OCI, the cost would be $6.8 million, and 22% of our roads would be resurfaced. So again, we feel like we can get a lot more bang for our buck and take care of a larger percentage of the road network with this strategy. And I just wanted to hit again on the Americans with Disability Act compliance and the curb ramps, and it's a focal point at the federal level for the Department of Justice and Department of Transportation. So again, it filters down to us through VDOT. But so our maintenance operations, crack filling, patching are not affected by that. But if we do get into any kind of resurfacing, whether it's microsurfacing or milling and overlay, we do have to upgrade crosswalks and curb ramps. And part of that is that, it may mean, as we do predominantly do that work in-house, and we have some very skilled people who do that work, but it may push some roads back a year or two for us to keep up with that level of work. So then just a quick update on the pavement maintenance schedule for 2023. We begin milling and overlay operations actually next week. So June 2023, milling and overlay. We'll be microsurfacing August through September of 2023. We're currently soliciting bids for that work. Utility patching, concrete repairs, and crack sealing are ongoing activities that our maintenance staff and operations perform. So did you all have any questions for me?
Are there any questions?
Trevor, just I'd be interested, obviously not to hitch on this spot now, but maybe as a follow-up, would be an understanding of the decay effect. Right, we're milling, paving, surface treatment relative to the state and federal allocations that we receive. So historically, we don't contribute any local funds until this upcoming year. So I'd be curious if because we're funding our street maintenance to funds that we receive elsewhere and not any additional supplemental as costs are going up, not only on labor but material and otherwise, is for every mile that we pave, how many miles are falling behind, and the inventory, because essentially the bill's going to come due, and I'd be curious about what that decay effect is.
Well, and that is something that we've looked at seriously, and why we intend to start using the microsurfacing as an additional practice is just that we can treat that much more of our roads. And so when you look at the life expectancy, 6 to 8 years for microsurfacing, so over a 10-year cycle, we'll catch many more of our roads. And we can't microsurface indefinitely, especially if there's curb and gutter,
Right.
Or a standing sidewalk like there are in some places in town. But it's something that we can do to kind of to stretch that out so that we can use those limited resources more effectively. I'm not sure that completely answers your question, but that's the thought process behind looking at these other techniques.
Yeah, it just kind of parallels, goes on to a conversation that Mr. Wood and I had years and years ago about the, essentially for every mile that we pave, we lose 3/4 of a mile or a mile. That gets into, there's a decay effect to the increasing inventory of roads that are going to require mill and paving, right? Which jacks up the cost. And so eventually, and it's great to do the microsurfacing, and it's a great resource and to kind of lean into to.
Yeah, and so these numbers here with the percent of roads resurfaced, so we'll actually work in the micro and mill and pave scenario. We'll actually be working on about 70% of the roads, because those roads that have been paved within the last 3 to 5 years, we'll go ahead and crack seal for that pavement preservation. And that number is, much less obviously with just a milling and paving scenario. But, just in theory, over 10 years, we'll treat about 80% of the roads versus 40%.
And you're able to do that without any, for the most part, restriping, right?
Microsurfacing will require restriping. And we've looked at that some and talked about what are the benefit. There may be some places where it's beneficial to stripe instead of apply thermoplastic because of life expectancy and things like that. But yeah, we'll still have, with microsurfacing, we'll still have to restripe.
It'd be curious if and Mr. Hampton, I mentioned this to you before about potentially using our MPO resource to develop striping plans for some of our legacy intersections, right? So if the DuPont Circle, as an example, is striped to support an industry that doesn't have thousands and thousands of people making a left turn anymore.
Right.
And so to reimagine how some of these intersections operate throughout the city with a revised striping strategy, and maybe using the MPO as a resource to do a small study to help us.
Yeah, and we try to do that when and where we can. I mean, we have some fairly talented folks in-house, and so we'll look at some things like that. We pull old aerial photography and try to look at, are there places we can stripe? We have had good luck at, especially even just getting bike lanes and things like that in. But I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yep.
I got a question. First off,
Yeah.
I know Noah Cardamone that works on the paving crew.
Yeah.
And man, there's just such a dedicated crew. He's always posting things on social media about, how proud he is of his guys. He's a coach as well as a good city employee. I'm just curious because I don't know, how many miles of road do we have in Waynesboro, roughly?
So we have 125 lane miles of VDOT classified roads. I do not know off the top of my head what the locally responsible number is. I would guesstimate it somewhere in the 15 to 20 miles of roads that don't fit the VDOT standards.
Do we have any kind of idea? Because I'm just trying to put it into simpler, for me to understand. How many miles projected in 2023 are you going to crack seal? How many miles are you going to micro surface? And how many mill and pave?
I should have those numbers with me, and I apologize, I do not. This is the projected, I know it's not real easy to see, this is a draft paving map, which is, it's changed some, but I could get you all that information.
I was just curious because I just want to look at it because I know, that's why I said about Noah, because I know you got such a hardworking crew. I know they're going to
Yeah.
get a lot done. I'd like to see because it's just focusing on how much they can get done because paving's a short season, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, yeah, I really appreciate you calling out Noah. He's a great employee, and we're lucky to have him with us. So that crew predominantly does utility patching for city crews. So the water fund, the sewer fund, the stormwater fund all contribute to the materials for them, and then VDOT pays for the labor. But they pave typically between, say, April and November, something like that. Crack sealing, sometimes if we get a couple warm days on kind of either side of that, they can get out and crack seal. So that's kind of how that in-house crew, that's mostly how they're structured. They have done some other work for us, but the Bookerdale and North Oak Lane bridges, they repave.
Yeah.
And then they do spot repairs of just potholes and things like that as well.
Well, just from what I see, they sure get a lot done in a.
They
short
most
period of
certainly
time.
do, and I'll get you all the numbers on what we intend to microseal and pave this coming year, and
Just a little overview, it don't have to be
yeah,
great.
I can get you something
Yeah.
this week.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions for Mr. McRae? Okay. This was informational, for informational purposes only, and no actions required tonight. Thank you so much for your time. That was really great.
All right. Thank you all.
Mr. Short, we saved all the fun stuff for you. Okay, we're going to go back to item 8 on the agenda. And item 8 is to consider adopting an ordinance imposing taxes for the calendar year of 2023. Items 8, 9, and 10 have all been introduced, seconded, and discussed, and unless a member wishes to comment or discuss, I will call the question for each of the items and begin with item 8, the ordinance imposing taxes for calendar year 2023. And do I have a motion to adopt?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Wood, and do I have a second?
Second.
And thank you, Mr. Lee. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries 5-0. Item 9 is to consider adopting the ordinance amending sections 30-58, H3 and A and B, 66-3C, 86-28A, and 86-139A of the Code of the City of Waynesboro. I'll call the question for this ordinance. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? And that passes 5-0. Item 10 is to adopt an ordinance for the annual budget for the fiscal year ending in June 30th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That motion also passes 5-0. Item 11 is to consider adopting a resolution establishing covenants and deed restrictions for certain city-owned commercial and industrial property at Nature's Crossing Technology Center and Waynesboro Commerce Industry Park. Mr. Hitchen.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. As we've discussed before, it's important for us to set standards for our industrial parks. With a planned completion of the Southern Corridor Road in the spring of 2025, that means that we will start marketing our industrial parks relatively soon. When that road is completed, we'll have access to 205 acres of city-owned industrial land. The 170 acres of new land off of Delphine, and 35 acres behind Town Center between the existing buildings and the interstate highway. The covenants that were provided to you ahead of time do a couple of things. They try to preserve nature, if you will, in our name, our tagline, as well as Nature's Crossing, by restricting companies to do certain things. A few of them are underground utilities, increased setbacks from Southern Corridor Road, additional screening and restrictions on location of outdoor screening and any public-facing streets such as Southern Corridor Road and Interstate 64, and restrict the type of use for those two industrial parks, primarily for manufacturing. Long document. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hitchen?
Just one question, Greg, is relative to the recording of the resolution, is it going to be recorded onto the deed?
It's my understanding, legal counsel.
Yeah, the declaration will be recorded, and any transfers required per the declaration to be, the language of the covenants are to be recorded in that deed.
Okay, great. And then the FIPS codes were not included. Well, we just kind of wanted to understand why those weren't included.
We looked at other covenants and just use the words made more sense than the NAICS codes or FIPS codes to everyone. So manufacturing, that's why we included a long list of things you can't do there to help define that a little bit better.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution establishing covenants and deed restrictions?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Item 12 is to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a performance agreement related to a NCTC on-site utility grant. Mr. Hitchin.
Thank you again. We've talked about this numerous times as well. The city has applied for a grant to assist in the water and sewer infrastructure for Nature's Crossing Technology Center. In December of 2022, we were one of 22 communities that were awarded a total of $90 million by the Commonwealth. The Waynesboro portion of that was $3.9 million, which allows us to go ahead and install the water line and the sewer line on-site for Nature's Crossing Technology Center. The performance agreement we have before you is the agreement with Virginia Economic Development Partnership, which outlines how that money will be spent, when it'll be spent, and again, get us into a higher tier ranking, which makes it more marketable, et cetera. Mr. Hamp's going to dive into a little bit on the financial ramifications of doing this.
Actually, Mr. McCormick's going to help us with that.
So during the budget process, the tax rate process that you all just passed in items 7, 8, and 9, council had set aside $520,000 for future debt service on this. That's about 2 pennies. The first grant that we applied for, I think we originally applied for closer to $8 million, ended up getting closer to $4 million. So that left a water tank on site, which was about $4 million, and then off-site estimates of around 11. So we figure worst case scenario somewhere between 14 and 15 in today's dollars. Debt service on that in total each year would be about $1.2 million, and that's assuming a roughly 5% interest rate holds. So worst case scenario, depending on whether council elects during next year's budget cycle to share the revenue with the schools or not, the additional tax revenue with the schools or not, it would be approximately 3 to 6 cents in real estate tax commitment.
Any questions?
So an additional 3 to 6 cents
Yes, sir.
next year?
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
It could be phased in.
yes, and I'm sorry, that in future years is how I should say that, because the way that the borrowing would work, I think we estimated you would need to borrow during fall of next year, which would be budget year 2025. So you just wrapped up 2024. So the borrowing would be fall of next year. Usually what happens when you borrow in the fall is you would have an interest payment due in the spring, and then your first full payment due in 2026. So you could phase all of this in over 3 years, with this year being the first versus doing 2025, all of it in 2025. Thank you. I'm sorry, I should have clarified that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any discussion? Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution establishing the covenants and deed restrictions?
I'll make it.
What are we doing the?
Actually, we're on the
Oh, wait.
No,
performance agreement.
agreement.
Oh,
Yep, the grant agreement.
okay, where am I? Where am I? What number?
12.
Oh. I think I got the wrong thing down here. Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution establishing, wait, that's the same thing, right?
Number 12,
I'm trying to,
performance agreement.
okay, is there a, yeah, motion to adopt a resolution establishing covenant, that's what I have down. And I want,
What we need.
okay, is there a motion to adopt authorizing the, to enter a performance agreement relating to the NCTC on-site utility grant? There we go. Do I have a motion? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood, and do I have a second?
Second.
And thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Item 13 is to consider introducing an ordinance amending sections 30-58H and G stormwater of the Code of City of Waynesboro. Mr. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So periodically, when we're working on other projects, staff and the legal team will review the code for clarity and any corrections needed to be made. And during a recent review of the stormwater section, it was noted that a subsection needed to be broken out. That is subsection G in your new ordinance that's in front of you this evening. It breaks the rates out and attaches each rate to the type of property that it pertains to, instead of having all of the rates underneath one subsection. And it also calls out that we do bill biannually. It's a little bit confusing in the current read of the section, whether we bill monthly or biannually. And then finally it brings one of our practices that we currently use, it makes it a little bit more clear. We don't bill people for mid-year during stormwater code. We don't bill mid-year ads until the beginning of the next year. And so we just called that out in code to make that clear. There's no rate changes and no real practice changes. It's a clarity adjustment only. The ordinance can be introduced this evening. It doesn't need a public hearing, and then it'll be final consideration at your next meeting.
Okay, any questions? And do I have a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? And this ordinance will receive final consideration at the next council meeting. And we've already received our presentation from the Public Works, so we'll move on to item 15, and that's to receive a presentation from the Fire Chief, Mr. Andrew Holloway, on staffing and apparatus.
So just by way of general introduction, Andrew is here this evening to provide this information, first related in terms of staffing to the recent application for the SAFER grant. The council may recall that the staff discussed with the council the opportunity to apply for a SAFER grant, which is intended to assist departments to build up staff. It's a graduated grant in which the grantor funds in the initial period of time the full staff expense, and then over time those staff expenses gradually become the responsibility of the locality. So we made application for that grant, and before acceptance we've made a commitment to the council that we'd come back and explain how additional staffing benefits our department's operation. And then secondly, Andrew's going to talk about apparatus, the fleet that the fire department has, its age and its deployment functionality, and that information is intended to help you as you prepare to consider the CIP, which does contain proceeds for engine replacement. So with that introduction, Chief Holloway.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you for having me this evening as I give you a presentation on our organization, specifically on our fleet and our staffing. Prior to getting started on those specific items and some challenges that lay ahead for those of us in that area, I'd like to just take a few minutes to talk about our organization and the service we provide, and also talk about some recent progress we've made within our organization. Sorry. So, for many, many years, a lot of people perceive the fire department as an organization that just provides fire protection, fire suppression operations. However, over the many years, fire departments evolved, and their mission has evolved in many different service levels. In addition to providing fire suppression and protection to the city and to the city and residents, we also provide emergency medical services, hazardous materials mitigation, technical rescue services, fire investigations, code enforcement, fire and life safety education, and community risk reduction programs, which consist of our child safety seat installs, smoke detectors installs, to name a few. I wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about some recent progress over the past year. I'm going to get into a lot of the challenges we're facing, but I think it's important to reflect on a lot of progress we've made in the past year, and that progress is because of you all as council and the support of our city administration to provide us a direct support. In the past year, we've improved our compensation, and on behalf of the men and women of our fire department, I want to extend our sincere thank you for that. For a number of years, our organization has struggled to keep up with competitive pay. I believe it was about a year and a half ago, I came to this council and presented an update on our organization that showed we were more than 20% behind the next closest organization in terms of compensation, at least 20%. And we've narrowed that gap and made big adjustments. So on behalf of the men and women of the fire department, and I want to say thank you to you all and the city administration for assisting us with that. Also, you appropriated funds for needed fire station maintenance. We have a very old fire station. Past members, current members have done a phenomenal job of maintaining this facility. This facility's never received any type of major renovation. It's been upgrades over the years, however, and that's mostly been internal by our firefighters. So thank you for the additional funds for that. And we continue to make progress on fire station number 2. This is something that's been talked about since 1986. And again, we've acquired land this past year due to your support, and we sincerely appreciate that. Moving on, talking about the challenges we face in our department. 2 specific areas to talk about is that we're facing with challenging is what the objective of us being here tonight is insufficient staffing to maintain current and recommended service levels and an aging fleet of fire engines in need of replacement. Before I get in to talk about some of the challenges we faced with our staffing, I want to outline our current staffing model, which is to the left there. We have a total of 34 staff. We have a deputy fire chief, a deputy fire chief, a captain who serves our assistant fire marshal, an office manager, 3 shift captains, 9 lieutenants, and 18 firefighters for a total staff of 34 personnel. If you shift your focus to the right, you'll see that we have a daily operational staffing model that I've presented up there, so you have a clear view of what a daily staffing model looks like for us. We currently have 10 personnel assigned per shift. We have a total of 3 shifts. And on a good day, when everybody's working, each engine company has a staffing of 3. Our truck company, some may refer to as a ladder truck, our ladder company, is a staffing of 3 personnel. And then our shift commander oversees the entire shift, and he's in the command SUV. When individuals are off for a variety of reasons, whether we're short, because we're short that we have a vacancy, someone's on leave, whether it's sick leave, annual leave, or whatsoever, we oftentimes have to drop to 9. And then sometimes we have to drop to 8. The biggest thing I've noted in red up there for you all to see is when we drop to 9 per shift, we end up having to drop to 2 personnel only on the truck company. When we go to 8 personnel per shift, we then take the shift commander out of the SUV and we put him onto the engine company, which is something we don't like to do, but again, we have to make sure the engine gets out the door. Oftentimes, our minimum staffing drops to 9 and 8 on a regular basis. And I wanted to just try to reinforce or try to keep in mind this staffing model as I go through the rest of the presentation and kind of be able to reference this moving forward. So the proposed staffing model, and the reason that we come to you all to request support for the 9 additional firefighters, this would enable us to add 3 firefighters per shift. This would allow us to achieve the following objectives. 1, we would be able to increase the staffing of each of our companies, our 2 engines and 1 truck company, to 4 personnel, and maintain a staffing of 3 on those rigs. And when I say maintain a minimum of 3, because there is times people are off, again, for leave, we do have vacancies and so forth. It allows us to maintain a shift commander and a command SUV to ensure the effective and efficient management of resources. And I give that a very broad term, but I really want to get a little bit further into that, is this individual is responsible, a lot of administrative responsibilities throughout the day. He handles scheduling, overseeing both stations. As you know, we currently have a second temporary station until we place the permanent one in service. He provides oversight of companies. He plans the training for the day, which is requirements of ISO and other industry standards. Again, I could get a long, detailed list. It also allows the individual to be flexible. That way, if there's assistance needed on the other side of the city with the other station, he can get there quickly. In addition, by manning the SUV, it is set up for command functions so that he can effectively manage the scene of emergency incidents with the correct software, accountability, command board, and so forth. And then finally, when staffing of the first aid crew ambulance, all companies will remain in service. As I'll get into here in a few minutes, I will actually show how a lot of times, even though we have staffing of 3 and sometimes 2 on our companies, it's reduced even more when we provide additional ambulance or provide an ambulance for the first aid crew and support them. So it'll allow us to keep additional apparatus in service. So why the increase in staffing? I think it's the first thing, or the main question is, why do we need this? So I'm going to go through a number of slides that hopefully I can paint a picture to better explain the reasoning for my request. For one, help maintain current service levels. Our continuous call volume now, our call volume due to the growth of the city continues to increase to over 2,300 calls annually. Again, this is a clear result of our continued growth of our city. We've had 2 recent fires where our we had a number of resources committed on other calls, so we had to delay in getting the additional companies there to provide that backup and that additional service level or consistent service level that we were striving for. And our consistent support of the Waynesboro First Aid Crew. We have a long-standing agreement with our Waynesboro First Aid Crew. They do a phenomenal job. Unfortunately, there's times when their resources have been depleted and we end up staffing an ambulance. With the continued growth in call volume, upcoming changes in our staffing model, I don't see this continued support going away, and I see it actually increasing. So these, again, help maintain current service levels is one of the reasons we're requesting. Also, to combat new risks our city and our entire fire service are facing. Today's fires and structures burn 8 times faster. Flashover, which is the point of no survivability, occurs in less than 5 minutes compared to legacy homes shown in studies to reach flashover in 29 minutes. This results in shortened collapse times in modern homes. The structures today are burning a lot differently than they were many years ago. They're built differently. The contents in these homes are different. So again, those are challenges not only that our city's facing, but the entire fire service is facing. Therefore, just gives another reason the importance of having staffing and the appropriate equipment to handle these emergencies. NFPA 1710, just a little bit background on the National Fire Protection Agency. They're a nonprofit organization that provide industry standards for all aspects of the fire service, between the way we're trained to how our fire trucks are designed to our safety standards, our deployment standards, and so forth. Under 1710, NFPA 1710, there's a specific standard on the organization and deployment of fire service operations, emergency medical operations, and special operations by career fire departments. Based on this standard, they provide a recommendation that engine companies be staffed with a minimum of 4 on-duty members. Ladder and truck companies be staffed with a minimum of 4 on-duty members. 1710 recommends, it goes into breaking down the minimum initial response model for 3 specific occupancies that we have throughout our city. 1 being single-family dwellings, 2 being open-air shopping centers, and 3 being garden-style apartment buildings. In the following slides, I'm going to break down each type of these occupancies. Our first one is, this is a picture, I've tried to put an image up here so you can actually see it at work. This is the recommended initial alarm assignment to a reported structure fire in a typical 2,000 square foot, 2-story single-family dwelling without a basement and with no exposures. Provide for the following. Their recommendation is that we have a total effective force of a minimum of 17 of the aerial devices being used within 8 minutes, 90% of the time. So a lot of times is, somebody will say, what do you use all these firemen for? Well, that's a prime example. We have the fire attack group, we have a driver operator, search and rescue team, our backup team, our initial rapid intervention team, our vent group that's going up to vent a home, our water supply, and then our instant commander with their staff aide. And again, this is the initial response within the first 8 minutes. When we don't meet these numbers, we have to make, just like anything in life, we have to make priorities. So at that point in time, we have to make, our instant commander is forced to make a decision. Which one of those functions are we not going to perform? And as we take away those functions that we're not performing, our efficiency and our effectiveness go down. So therefore, that just really paints a picture of the importance. I will be up front, even us adding these 9 personnel and dividing them among 3 shifts, we're not going to be able to meet this standard 100% of the time. Through statistical data and review of our incident reporting, we look in utilizing our automatic aid, which we border between Company 11 Fire Station that sits outside the city and the Dunes Fire Department sits on the other side just outside the city. We figure we'll be able to meet this standard if all goes well, everybody's working, nobody's off, about 21 to 22% of the time. So I just want to be upfront that while we're striving to meet this standard, these additional staffing isn't going to solve us meeting a standard, but it will get us closer and therefore reducing our risk and making us a safer community. I'm going over 2 more scenarios. One is the typical open air strip mall. They recommend a total effective force of 27 firefighters within 8 minutes, 90% of the time. Again, we would definitely request mutual aid for this, and we realize this is a really long-term goal, but it's the importance that I want to show that we are being conservative of our request of the additional staffing. And again, we look at our garden-style apartments. Total effective force 27, 28 if an aerial device is being used. And finishing up specifics on our staffing and where we're at in our staffing model, I bring to your attention a landmark study that's specific to the staffing of our companies, because I've gave you examples of what a staffing model should look like with the total amount of firefighters, but now I'm giving an example of why the importance of having properly staffed fire engines and truck companies. A landmark study issued by the Department of Commerce National Institute of Standards shows that the size of firefighting crews has a substantial effect on the fire service's ability to protect lives and property in residential fires. From the many experiments of this in-depth study, they found that for a 4-person firefighting crew could complete 22 essential fire and rescue tasks and a typical structure fire 30% faster than a 2-person crew and 25% faster than a 3-person crew. This in-depth study demonstrates of getting the correct number of firefighters to the scene to save lives and property. Before I transition into the apparatus and fleet section of this presentation, I want to give you chances so I don't overwhelm with information. I know this is a lot, to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions?
Are the standards based off population? Just in curious, I mean, like, think of the town of Stanley. I mean, you know, they'll never hit that sort of scale.
So that's a great question. It's a multitude of areas they look at. One, they give you your dense population, what's considered urban, suburban, and rural, as in population, so designate off that. And then do you have a career department, or is it all volunteer? And what they do is, and I'll be more than glad to share the standard with you, they break it down to of different ways to meet the standard. If it's a volunteer department, they have a whole separate standard they got to meet. That's a 17, or they recommend it's a 1720 standard, and then that would break down into specifics on that staffing model. But because you take the town of Stanley, I was just recently there with my daughter at a softball game, they're a volunteer fire department, so they have to meet the 1720 standard, which is a totally different standard. But great question, thank you for that.
Chief,
If you would like that standard, I can get it for you.
Yeah, I mean, just an email or something, that'd be great. And
Okay.
Just curiosity.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Chief, you said that you staffed the ambulance for Waynesboro First Aid. Is that due to your requirements for EMT certifications?
No,
as well?
sir, that's to ensure a continuity of service levels. So for example, let's say this evening at the station, the first aid crew gets slammed with calls, they get call after call. Once they get to where they have no resources available, then they would tone us for an ambulance. And when I talk about the fire department providing emergency medical services, we do it for three distinct reasons. One, if it's a really bad medical emergency, then they would add us to provide the additional manpower that it takes to handle a significant emergency. Or they dispatch us to provide medical care until the ambulance to say they're coming from the hospital. Or three, and that's the one I'm talking about where we get into staff in the ambulance, they have no more ambulances or no more personnel readily available, so we then drop staffing of our ladder truck, our staffing moves over to the ambulance, and they respond to that ambulance. If you rode by our station recently in the last 3 or 4 months, we have moved an ambulance across the street. We've had a strong relationship with the first aid crew for many years, and we've always had an agreement to say, hey, when you're deplete your resources, we will respond in ambulance. And we've continued with that, even with changes in our fire administration. And from my opinion is we have a moral and ethical responsibility is to answer the calls as they come in. And that's why we've continued to do that, to ensure a continuity of service to our citizens. It has hurt us some aspects that, again, we'll drop our ladder truck from being staffed, and we're delayed on getting on another call, but however, we have to answer them the way they come in. So,
Thank you.
That's the slide where you showed the breakdown of the, how many on a crew.
yes, sir.
The first one was 10. Is that ideal for this area and population, or is that just dealing with the amount of staff that we have?
So the ideal is we have 10 personnel assigned to a shift. I hope I'm not misunderstanding you. The idea is to keep it at 10, and we've added these 3. Hopefully, we would maintain a minimum of 10 or 11 at a time.
Yeah.
But due to leave, because beyond our control or vacancies, oftentimes we have to go to 8. Because if we don't go to at least 8, then we're forcing our men and women to work overtime, and then next thing you know, we got a morale issue. And again, we're already forcing sometimes even to keep it at 8. But we have to have some type of gap there to make up for them to have time off for their vacations, sick leave, and so forth.
Yeah, I understand that, but with the amount of calls you get and the population we have, if you had a perfect world where you could make your own schedule, would you have 14 or 16, or is just 10? I'm just saying.
If it was
what would be the perfect number?
The world I would like to get to is to have 4 on our 2 engines, 4 on our ladder truck, 1 in our command SUV, and maybe 1 or 2 extra, so that way you never drop below 4 on that ladder truck, because that ladder truck personnel, it takes more than 1 or 2 to operate it. You got to put people in the bucket to go rescue someone. You've got to have an operator. So to answer your world, everything would have 4 as a minimum staffing, but I understand things take time. At this point in time, I'm just trying to get to 3 as a minimum staffing. And I hope I answered your question.
No, you did.
Okay. All right. So if there are more questions, I'll move on to the second part. So our current fleet of apparatus, this is a picture, or an image here of our 6 pieces of that sit in our fire station. In addition to the ambulance, we have a 1995 International salvage truck. Again, this is a salvage truck, isn't used a lot, and I don't have it included on the replacement or as a request as replacement. It kind of fills a gap right now. It's a truck we used to use many years ago, and we used it for miscellaneous items, but it still does serve a purpose. We have a 1999 Suffin fire engine, a 2003 fire engine, 2009 Pierce fire engine, 2016, and of course you all know, I'm sure you've seen our 2021 Pierce ladder truck that we're all very proud of. As we transition I'm narrowing our focus now to our fire engines itself specifically. What I've put up here is an engine hours and mileage breakdown of each piece of equipment, specifically our fire engines, and that's the one thing that we're struggling with due to multiple reasons. As you see, our 1999 Suffin has over 9,800 engine hours, over 93,000 miles. And if you see up here underneath our 1999 Suffin, I have a converting engine hours to mileage. So something unique about a fire engine is it's not necessarily the number of road mileage that you have to, that really puts a strain on the motor. It's the hours on that motor itself. Because a fire engine could sit on the scene of a structure fire for 8 hours running. And again, it ain't putting miles, but it is putting wear and tear on that motor. So I've did a lot of research, talking to several fleet managers and so forth throughout Virginia, and I've come to a consistent approach that's utilized that takes, for fire engines, that take the engine hours and use the formula to convert it to miles. So for example, they'll take the engine hours, times it by 45, and that actually shows a ballpark of what that mileage would look like if it was on a road as a tractor trailer, for example. Again, just to paint a better picture. If you look at each one, we have a total engine maintenance of over $76,000 on the 99. You see the breakdown of the 2003 and the 2009 and the 2016. The one thing that I would like to bring to your attention is the first, if you haven't noticed, is just to try to explain into detail a couple issues we're dealing with. The 2003 Pierce fire engine now has more engine hours and mileage than our 1999, which is due for replacement. What happened is several years ago when we went without a ladder truck for a number of years, we took personnel from that ladder truck and some of the loose equipment and put it on that fire engine basically and moved that to the front line. So it ended up running like, I think, 2 to 3 years while that fire truck was, we were working to replace it. So it got put back on the front line, therefore increased, and it ended up increasing the engine hours and mileage. We have made a point to take the 99 and put it on it'd be the first reserve to be put on the front line, so that way we're getting every bit out of it before we hopefully replace it in the future. The second thing I'll bring to your attention is it's noticeable that our 2016 and our 2009 have extensive maintenance cost, more than our older apparatus. But please remember, these trucks are the ones that are running every single day. So that's the reasoning for the increased cost. In addition, the one additional item I add to that is in our older engines, there's a number of components we have not repaired because we don't feel it's very cost effective. I'll give an example. In our 1999 Suffin, we have a foam system. When that quit working, instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars to replace that foam system, we removed it. It felt like it wasn't a necessity, especially or a very good decision cost-wise to replace a foam system, extensive amount of money, so that was removed for service. So we've done things to save money. We recognize the increase in maintenance, so we've taken some time and looked at our entire organization, the way we run calls. One of the things we'll be implementing come June 1 that we've worked with our Emergency Communications Center is do we need to run all these vehicles down for every single fire alarm? So we've studied this abroad. It's mixed opinions in the fire service. However, the best practice is, hey, do we really need to run 2 engines in a ladder truck to a fire alarm? So we'll be reducing that response by one piece of fire apparatus. That in essence will save us in wear and tear and fuel down the road. Now, that does not mean that if there's an emergency reported fire alarm, there's any evidence of a confirmed fire or its question, then that assignment would be filled with the entire response of a normal to a structure fire. But again, we're trying to study things. Are we doing things as efficiently we can do to run day-to-day operations? So we're really looking at everything, trying to save costs every which way we can. My proposed fleet replacement plan, is to adopt a 20-year replacement plan for all fire engines and begin implementing this plan in 2029. In order to do this and to get on this plan, we are requesting to replace our 1999 fire engine immediately and our 2003 fire engine in 2 years. At that point, if we get to 2029, then we could move towards the 20-year replacement, and we'd begin replacing, first start with our 2009 fire engine. Following this fleet replacement plan, this would require purchase of a new fire engine on average every 5 years. The benefits of this proposed fleet replacement plan: reduce maintenance cost and reduce out-of-service time for apparatus, therefore assuring a continuity of service. I wish I was able to provide you specifics and as in to how many times each rig's been out of service. Our software our asset management software we've recently adopted in the last couple of years. We've been working on that, and that's one of the some data collection that we have started recently to collect so we could have this information. The only thing I can assure you is each one of them, and you can tell by the cost of the maintenance, have been out of service at times for long periods. And another benefit is a more efficient use of our administration. We spend a lot of time day to day dealing with mechanical issues, again, because the apparatus continues to age. So having a replacement plan, and moving with that plan will allow us a little bit more efficient use, again, to tackle other tasks that we have. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the National Fire Protection Agency provides a broad, numerous standards, and one of them, in addition, is they provide a standard on the inspection, maintenance, testing, and retirement of in-service emergency vehicles. They have recommended that apparatus more than 15 years old that have been properly maintained and still serviceable condition be placed in reserve status. They recommend the apparatus that's over 25 years old be retired and replaced. One of the things they note in the last 10 to 15 years, much progress has been made in upgrading functional capabilities and again improving the safety features of the fire apparatus, therefore leading to these recommendations. That concludes my presentation. At this time, I'll take any questions you may have.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Holloway? No? Okay.
Thank you.
So much for your time. Okay. Item 16 is to receive a financial update for the fiscal year 2023. Mr. Cameron McCormick, our Assistant City Manager for Finance.
Thank you, and good evening again. The finance report included in your packet this evening is for the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 2023, which ended March 31st of 2023. So the numbers you're looking at are a month or 2 old, but that's how long it takes to get bank recs done, make sure things are in the right spot. You can't just go through it and, assume 75% of revenue, 75% of expenditures is where we should be. We do have a couple of things that are a little bit more cyclical than that. So, for example, general property taxes, we're already about 101% of budget. That's because we collect all our property taxes by December 5th. We do first installment of real estate tax on July 31st, and then personal property and real estate are the second installment of real estate, and the full installment of personal property are due on December 5th. That's up because of, or a little bit over the budgeted estimate, because of business personal property came in a little bit higher than the previous year, and then real estate supplemental bills for items that weren't included in the budget estimates from the assessor in the previous year. When we did budget estimates, both of those have been updated, adjusted in your 2024 budget that was just adopted to reflect those increases. Use of money and property is one that's over pretty significantly. When we did this budget, the Fed had not started rate hikes to try and curb inflation. So as we worked through the year, most of our rates most of our funds that are invested are in CDs that are invested in banks throughout the country. That's done through us through an ICS account. Through First Bank, that's tied pretty significantly to the Fed rate. And so as that started to increase, we started to see increases in our returns. That has been increased in your next year's budget as well for a little bit higher estimate. Didn't go all the way to where it's projected to end this year just because we don't know how long those rate increases will go. And we also have some funds that we've been building over a couple of years that we'll spend during the next year, which will bring your overall cash balance down some, which will bring your interest rate or interest revenue down some as well. But we have adjusted that estimate in your next year's budget. Non-revenue receipts are right at 25%. And actually, I need a note on that to pull out and see what's there. Then we have water fund, sewer fund, water fund, sewer fund, refuse fund, and stormwater fund. All of those are tracking at about 70%, except for the stormwater fund. The stormwater fund is only at 50% because we bill that into increments. On the expenditure side, all of those are tracking as would be expected. Most of them sit between 60 and 70%, except for in your water, sewer, and refuse stormwater funds. Their operations sit at around 50. That's mostly because of vacancy savings, and then they're highly payroll-intensive funds, so they track a little bit behind in terms of your payroll runs, about a week or 2 weeks behind before it hits the ledger. A couple of updates from the finance department, just general updates. Plan to bring 2 budget amendments over the next 2 months. So the first amendment, it will actually amend your 2023 budget, so the budget that you're working in currently, and that's to fund the rest of the 2024 CIP plan. So that's fund balance that was actually generated in 2022. We'll amend the 2023 budget and then fund the 2024 manager's CIP. That's going to include things like the rest of the funding for the radio project, any funds that are appropriated for the fire truck, any funds that are appropriated for locally responsible paving. Will make up the majority of that amendment. The amendment in July will include the small capital items that were cut from the budget, your maintenance items, your vehicles, your replacement items. That will come at the first meeting and second meeting in July. And then last but not least, the external auditors were on staff during last week to complete preliminary field work. They do things during that time, like they look at our internal controls, make sure they have an understanding of them. They test our APA compliance. All of that went well. They seem to go away happy. They will be back in September to do our annual audit, which should be completed by the end of November, early December, and presented to you all at your first meeting in December before Christmas. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. If not, if you want to look at the report and send me any questions you might have, that would be fine as well.
Are there any questions? No? Okay, thank you so much, Cameron. Item 17 is communications, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Hamp?
I don't have anything this evening, ma'am.
Okay. Then item 18 is citizen comment period. Do you have anyone signed up?
We're not doing caps.
Yes,
Okay,
Craig Scott.
okay. Mr. Scott, I'd like to remind all the speakers who speak tonight to state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 4 minutes to address council.
Honorable Madam Mayor, honorable councilman, hardworking city folk. 1616 Armistead, Ward B, Craig Scott. First of all, Chief Andrew, I want to get, he's still here? Yes, he is. I want to get some cool merchandise from the fire department, those cool t-shirts. Anyway, but for another time. Hopefully we'll get some for sale. As you know, there's a mindset that's been going on for 130, 40 years in this country, a government-central monopoly on anything from soup to nuts, which some of them were listed tonight. But I'm going to take a different tack tonight. What is Waynesboro doing right? We have a twin city across the valley, Stanton. It's a headache for the city council. It costs the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's the golf course. We don't have to worry about our golf course. If there's something broken, it's fixed by the River City Collective. You don't have to worry about it. You're busy enough. You're busy enough. If something goes bad, it doesn't cost the taxpayers money. If the business has a problem, they go to their members voluntarily without coercion. Stanton has the opposite problem. It's a mindset that we've stumbled into here, or a situation, not by planning in advance, but by fortuitousness. And this mindset, I argue, can be in reverse, whether it's leaf collection, maintenance of pipes, city contractors, as you know. We also have scores of miles that are done by developers. There's other ways of doing things that can be done less expensively, more efficiently, lower cost, and the employees will have better benefits, retirement, etc. It's a win-win situation. It's an optimal delivery of goods and services. So we have a privately run, a free market or relatively free market golf course. Stanton has a government-centric one at Gypsy Park. We all know where the park is. And it's a headache and a minefield for the city of Stanton, which we don't have to deal with. And we all enjoy the view as we drive by. It's a win-win for the community. So with this positive example that we are doing right now, I'm hoping to inculcate presentations at your leisure, at your coffee, wherever, to help our city. Better services at lower cost is a win-win for everybody, especially with harder times coming. Better cash management, maybe a Treasury Direct where we get 20, 30, 40 basis points more, have increased liquidity, and we don't get held up in CDs if a bank goes belly up, because we're being directly, cash is being directly managed right from the U.S. Treasury. If that goes belly up, well, then we're all in trouble. Thank you very much for your kind attentions. I hope it was edifying, useful, and God bless you all, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cheryl Carey?
Hello, Cheryl Carey, 820 Fairway Drive. I'm coming here because we all come up to this podium to voice our opinions, tell you what we think or want questions to, yet we never get any answers. It's like we just come up here and talk, and then we go away. You've said there's not enough time for answering questions. And I've thought about this, and if we have 4 minutes, why can't we come up here in our 4 minutes and say, I have a question that I'd like an answer to? Ask our question. You answer it in the 4 minutes. We just take 4 minutes. Then we're all happy. And if you can't answer the question at all, or can't answer it sufficiently, then at the next meeting, come, read the question and the answer. Because I feel we get more civic involvement if we came here and got an answer if we had a question. We come up here and it's just like, it's basically pointless. Because I'm just telling you how I feel. And if you're taking a vote on how everyone feels, then that might affect you. But if we're asking a specific question, we never get an answer. Now you can say, I can call the office. Well, then it's phone tag. You call, you usually leave a message. Someone might call you back. You might get a message on your phone. You might pick up the phone. You're not prepared to have a conversation because you're involved in something else. So if we have 4 minutes, I don't know why we can't ask a question. And if you know the answer, give us the answer. If you don't, get back with us. I think more people would get involved and come here because it would be a process. My questions are, and I'll call this week sometime and see if I get someone on the phone or if I leave a voicemail and I go through that whole process. My questions are there illegals here? I've asked that before, and that's all I say, and no one answers. Are we paying for them with food, housing, medical? Do we keep track of them? That's a question. What happened to the managers and the employees at the animal shelter who killed that dog, whose owner had a conversation with? I want to know what the consequences were, what has been corrected. That shouldn't happen. What happened at the animal shelter? Was it looked into? What was resolved? What's happening to the building down on Main Street, the one across from Heritage, near 304? It's been derelict for years. You go down there, in your car, you can smell the mildew. It's a health hazard. It's disgusting. It's not attractive. We're all talking about all these projects to fix everything up. Main Street's our big draw. It's a health hazard. I don't know if OSHA should be called in to spur things along or what. I hear that the electric's been cut, the water, asbestos. This has taken years. Let's put a little push to whoever needs a push and get this done. It's too long. And I wonder, when you listen to all of us, with our questions and what we say, do you get a printout by the secretary, and at your meetings, do you actually look at what we said, asked, and talk about it? Or is it just a wash? Well, we got rid of that, we got rid of those citizens, and we're done with. Do we really matter? I really think if we had a question and answer, 4 minutes, we'll get more participation here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Item 19, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. All in favor, say aye. Aye. I heard Mr. Allen. Okay, we are adjourned.